ahead of you, I think, sets the tone for what sits right at the heart of what Family Homes Fund is about. And our hope for what is essentially a young organization is that into its future, the challenges that the images that is before you pose continue to be the fuel that drives this organization and trying to address the need of housing among millions of Nigerians living in significantly informal settlements with no access to security, with no access to water, with no access to power, with no access to any community facilities at all. Sometimes living next door to garbage heaps, as poisonous as they may be. Bottom slides, also crime. Crime, raising children, like that young boy sitting on that image on your right, living in fear, not knowing what the future holds. All of that may sound strange, but this is the real life experience of a significant number of Nigerians who continue to be excluded from the housing market because we are building houses that are not accessible to them. So what have some of the thinkers of our generation and even before said about this? So, notable American president, he said that if a free society cannot help the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich. Okay? And the Greek philosopher Plutarch said that an imbalance between the rich and the poor is the oldest and most fatal ailment. Is the oldest and most fatal ailment of all republics. I don't want to delve into a lot of this, but I'm sure that you can read between the lines and understand what the implications are of the first slide, the images in the first slide, and the implications for the future of you and I who may be excluded from that experience now. And then it says, Adam Smith, the notable economist, so we've had a government person, we had a Greek philosopher, now we have a notable economist, Adam Smith, saying, no society can surely be flourishing and happy, of which by for greater part of the numbers are poor and miserable. Those are the people on the slide. And finally, the Mexican civil rights activist, Cesar Chavez, said, history will judge societies and governments and their institutions not by how big they are or how well they serve the rich and the powerful, but how effectively they respond to the needs of the poor and the helpless. Those are significant food for thought as during this conference we begin to engage on what direction housing policy and housing strategy goes in Nigeria. So I've said all of that to lead to this. It is the recognition of all of those facts. The fact that a significant proportion of our population is living in what is unacceptable circumstances. The recognition of the fact that actually no society can thrive or prosper given that increasing gap between the rich and the poor. That is one of the understandings that has led the government to think about a fund, the Family Homes Fund, as a social housing finance agency, and that is what we are. The underlying commitment of the Family Homes Fund is to at least begin the journey towards addressing those issues. How can we ensure that an increasing number of our fellow citizens, in fact the majority of our citizens, have access to a good quality of life, housing beyond the home, in good environments and good facilities? So that is what the Family Homes Fund was created for. So what is the Family Homes Fund? Most of you already know this, but for those who are new in terms of engagement with us, just some very high-level information about who we are and how we work. The Family Homes Fund essentially is a joint partnership between the Federal Ministry of Finance through what is called the Federal Ministry of Finance Incorporated, the private investment arm of the Federal Ministry of Finance, and the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, who between them hold the founding shares of the Family Homes Fund. The Ministry of Finance owns 51% of our shares, and the Sovereign Wealth Fund has 49%. Our midterm objective is to bring in additional shareholders and diversify ownership, and I think that journey hopefully begins in 2022. As part of its establishment, the federal government, through those shareholders, gave a commitment of 500 billion capital towards a seed funding for the fund to finance what is an ambitious program of housing development, perhaps the biggest housing program that we have had since the entity today called Nigeria has existed. That is to finance about 500,000 homes initially, and then we'll go on from there. As I said, the primary objective of the fund, and I think this is very important because I think my team is here, we spend a lot of our time trying to convince people that actually, as much as we would love to finance 50 million naira houses and 70 million naira houses, actually we are quite fascinated with the job that we have been given, ensuring that we are only engaging on financing homes that are affordable to people who are at the bottom end of our economic pyramid, particularly people who are very, very poor, and that is really what social housing is about. The company became effectively operational in January 2019, so if you include the year of the COVID, it's really been effectively trading for about 2.5 years, and now has a staff turnover of about 34, I think, as I said. So what do we do? What does Family Homes Fund do? Family Homes Funds makes affordable housing, let's say social housing, happen, so that we are clear about the definitions, by developing and offering financing solutions to affordable housing developers, public or private, and the people who buy and rent the homes that they build. So that is basically what we're about, is providing financing for public and private sector developers, but also the individuals who actually have to buy those homes that they have built. Our current pipeline of partners include a wide range of state governments. We'll provide that detail later in the schedule. And in the last year alone, we have committed in excess of 43 billion naira to projects which are promoted by state governments alone, including private sector developers, housing cooperatives, corporations, and interestingly in Kaduna, a women's housing group that we expect to support to develop a social housing scheme that is targeted at women, mostly market women in Kaduna. We are working with our development partners, influencing them to create jobs on the projects that we support as a very deliberate strategy. One of our key results is ensuring that in investing what is a significant amount of public capital, that we are also providing jobs for a lot of our people, particularly those on low income who are currently out of jobs. Next slide. So how are we doing this? And I think this is important for those of you who want to know how the Family Homes Funds work. So our key results from our shareholders through the life of the fund are right there at the top: 500,000 homes and 81.8 million jobs. So what are we doing to ensure that we move towards achieving those results? We had 4 channels, as we call them, but now there are 5, and I explain why. The first one, which I think is colored orange, is the Affordable Housing Fund, which is essentially a construction finance facility both for private and public sector developers. In simple parlance, it means that we are providing money for developers, public or private, to build houses that meet our requirements. And those requirements include a number of things, and I'm sure during the questions time we'll have a chance to engage on that. But primarily and fundamentally is that those houses need to be affordable to the market segment that we exist to serve. So that is our perhaps most active channel for the time being, and we'll talk about what we have done on that channel over the last 2.5 years. The second channel, which is rather new and is just beginning to take off, is the National Social Housing Program, and I think that is a big focus of the discussion today. The National Social Housing Program is an element of the Economic Sustainability Program. You probably will recollect, most of you, that last year the federal government launched a 2.3 trillion naira stimulus package as part of the post-COVID efforts to reboot the economy. A key plank of the Economic Sustainability Plan was the National Social Housing Program, which is funded through a deed of debenture. Essentially, that is a sexy word for a loan that Family Homes Fund is taking from the Central Bank of Nigeria to finance 300,000 homes for people who are on very, very low income. And I think Festus referred to the 2 million naira home. One of the key signatures of the social housing program is that the houses have to start for as low as 2 million naira to be affordable to the market that we target. The status of the social housing fund is that we have completed the deed of debenture with the central bank. We expect over the next couple of weeks that the first drawdowns is drawn down in batches of at least 20 billion will begin to happen over the next couple of weeks, and that will allow what is a huge backlog of projects to start to hit the ground. We expect that by the end of this year, 40,000 homes financed under the NSHP will be at various stages of development. The yellow channel is the Help to Buy fund, and that starts to deal with a totally different part of the housing market. The first two build the house, but when you have built the house, how do people on low income then go on to actually acquire those houses for themselves or even rent it? What the Help to Buy fund does is to provide assistance to people on low income to ensure that they can have access to the capital that they need to own the houses that are built primarily through the Affordable Housing Fund. And the key element of the Help to Buy fund is primarily to provide a 40% of the cost of the houses is given to the buyers as a deferred loan. So in principle, over the first 5 years of the loan, they don't pay anything for the loan. And then they start paying back the loan from year 6 onwards in a graduated format, which aligns with the increase of their income. The main effect of the Help to Buy fund is an innovation that is intended to allow people on low income to step on the housing ladder. The green channel, critical. And when we come to talk about the program, you will see how important we think this is for the housing market in Nigeria. Given the very low income, given the level of poverty that our economy sits on, the Green Channel is a major lever in terms of the Family Homes Funds program. It's a rental housing fund. And that recognizes that for a largely informal sector, close to 80% of our working population, we need to take the notion of formal rental accommodation seriously. The fact is that it is not a new idea. In most of our urban populations, close to 75% of people are already tenants. They are renting their house. The only problem is that they are renting them from mom and pop's landlords. They have no security of tenure. They don't enjoy any service. They can be kicked out at the landlord's will. What a formal rental housing fund or tenure does is give them first a security of tenure. As long as they pay their rent, they stay in the house. They can't be kicked out willy-nilly. Secondly, they enjoy a good quality management service. And finally, they acquire a right to buy the house as and when their economic circumstances allow them to do so. So we're exploring and are beginning on a pilot program with 6 housing corporations. We expect to tidy up all of the preliminary work around that this year, and with the initial investments for, I think it's 606 years, 3,000 homes starting in the Q1 of 2022. At the bottom of all that is that, I think as Nigerians, we've been disappointed so much that we are cynical about things actually happening. But we are committed at the Family Homes Fund, and a lot of what we want to do is actually underpinned by a commitment to 4 key values. First is financial viability. We have our CFO here. We're going to give you some of where we are 2 years post-trading in terms of securing the financial viability of the institution. I thank all of you for your warm congratulations on our Sukuk bond, which we issued last week. That is, not only is this the first corporate Sukuk bond in Nigeria, not only is it the first phrase bond issued in Nigeria, it's also the first bond out of the capital market financing low-income housing. Before now, the message was that pension funds will not touch low-income housing. That has been the matter. We are glad that we've been able to prove that wrong. But it's beyond the Family Homes Fund. What that does, because we will deliver on our commitments on the bond, is that other providers in the market can now go to our deep capital markets to raise money to finance low-income housing. We have broken that myth and shown that actually capital market will finance low-income housing and social housing where the opportunity arises. And just for the data, 64% of the subscription to our Sukuk bond were from pension funds. So they were not individual. That ourselves we found quite surprising on the back of a strong financial viability. Second is well governed. Critical that even though it's owned by 2 quasi-government entities, the Ministry of Finance and a sovereign investment fund, which in itself is owned by the government of Nigeria, it was very important at the outset that this was a well-governed institution with an independent board that is able to take key and rational decisions. Finally, it's about people. Significant investment in not only attracting the best talents, but also retaining the best talents and rewarding them. And I think 2 of my colleagues, our senior leadership team is here, and I think you will hear them out. They provide the bedrock of what we can achieve. And finally, in the business in which we are, integrity. Understanding the trust that is imposed in us and ensuring that we use government money and even money from the private sector and the capital market in a way that engenders confidence. Next slide. So making it happen, what are the key things that we're doing? And we have this diagram about all of the balls in the air that we continue to work on to be able, essentially, these are the ingredients that can make us and will make us to deliver on our commitment. One is basically, and I'll go through the 6 of them, building capacity. When I come to talk about the structuring, which I'll do in a minute, of the social housing program, you will see that a critical element of the NSHP is delivering, perhaps for the first time ever, significant growth in our mortgage sector. Some of our mortgage sectors, as a result, banks, as well as the NSHP, would double, even triple their current loan portfolio. And that means that at the end of the NSHP, the result we expect to see are stronger, more robust primary mortgage banks. That is critical. Financing. We did our debut bond issue in the Sukuk, but we are not done. That was basically to test the waters, and we'll be going back to the capital markets on and on and on again to tap the capital that we need. Nkiru, who's our CFO, has a big job ahead of her. In 2022, she has to raise in excess of 400 billion naira to finance the program for 2022. So financing, creating the financial base to support the program is a critical part of what we need to do. I talked about land assembly, a significant focus in ensuring that we have land in the right places, of the right quality, that where people want to live, to ensure that the program achieves a stable delivery path. Partnerships are very key. One of the critical areas where we have a lot of work to do is developing strong and robust partnerships across the value chains. And that includes from the design stage to suppliers, to contractors, to facility managers, and that continues to require a huge amount of our effort. You will see something there called the 4 levers. One of the big challenges and risks to what we are looking to do is the fact that we have an extremely volatile market. So we have a 4 levers project which is basically around a number of initiatives. And it's interesting that one of them, which was launched today, was about standardization of designs and specification that enables us to give some more predictability to the houses that we finance. It also offers some support to private sector and public sector developers, because we will have done the work for you. You will have had standard designs and specifications that you can work off, and that kind of enables your journey into the market a lot quicker. Just to kind of describe how the Affordable Housing Fund works and how the National Social Housing Program works. So I will focus on just those two, and I will leave all of the other channels, help to own land. I think this is probably kind of the critical big volume aspects of our work. So in terms of the Affordable Housing Fund structure, it's fairly simple. Currently, and I know that this is a subject of significant challenge for many of our partners. I understand you, but we also have a reason why we have adopted this approach in the interim. So primarily, a lot of family homes funds exposure at the moment is via lending to state governments. Okay? Is via lending to state governments. State governments are then, on the back of the capital that we give them, able to engage with private sector developers or builders or contractors, whichever name they choose to call them, who actually build the houses. We see this as a win-win situation. One, because it protects us from credit risk that we cannot really control. But secondly, it localizes and ensures that state governments carry a huge part of the responsibility because they have a role to play. And I continue to believe that I know of no market for social housing anywhere in the world where governments or public authorities don't have a major role to play. But as I've noted on that slide to the bottom, at stage 2 of the development, for now, for young institutions, we need to protect its credit quality. Remember, the value around financial sustainability and its capacity to accept huge risks is also limited. But we are growing, and I think very slowly we are moving into beginning to talk about financing of cooperatives and workers' groups and things like that. And eventually, hopefully in the not too long future, we will have the confidence and the robustness to be able to take on direct lending to private sector developers. But that is really where we are, and I think it's important for me to clarify that, and I'm sure that I expect a lot of, I expect some questions on that, but we'll be quite happy to take them. Now, for the National Social Housing Program structure, very similar to the Affordable Housing Fund, but slightly different. And I will kind of point out the key differentials. And this is probably new because I'm not sure, with the exception of a few people in this room who have engaged with us on the Social Housing Program. I think some of you have engaged with us on the Affordable Housing Program, so you know the drill. but on the NSHP, just bear me. So essentially, we are borrowing money from the CBN. We're taking a loan for 15 years from the Central Bank of Nigeria at 5% per annum. We are then on-lending that money via a development agreement to a state government or its agencies, and different states are employing different partners, but typically it will be a state-owned agency we are lending onto. They then do as in the Affordable Housing Fund. They then appoint their developers or their contractors to build the house. Of course, we have a close eye on who and what. Typically we will have a right of objection if we felt that they were trying to populate the place with politicians. Okay, so they have the delivery partners build the houses. The houses, when built, are transferred to what is called on that slide QFI. So this is the term that was developed in the deed of debenture, and essentially it means the qualifying financial institutions. Essentially it's a mortgage bank or a commercial bank. So we are currently working with both. And essentially what happens is that we, on completion of the houses, enter into what is called a novation agreement with the qualifying financial institution. I will summarize broadly where we are so that I don't read a big table of specific sites to you. But essentially, as at the end of Q2 2021, we have 5,408 homes that are completed. That's across about 8 states. Under construction across 11 states at the moment is 9,148 homes. We expect all of those to be completed by the 31st of December, actually more likely towards the middle of November. And currently we have what we call committed or credit stage. Just to be clear, these are schemes either where we have granted approval but is waiting for one legal thing or the other to start, or where we have completed our internal credit process and is waiting for a final board approval, but all of which we expect to start in Q3, Q4 of 2021. That's about 13,543 homes. Outside of this, if you call them pies in the sky, so these are what we call active pipelines of projects that we are working on but have not been through our credit process. They are maybe halfway through or just starting. We have in excess of 30,000 units or so in the pipeline. Our target for 2021 is 50,000 homes by the end of the year. 2022 is our big year. Having laid a lot of the foundations, all of my colleagues that are here on the executive team, Inkiru joined us in January 2021, and Sonny joined us about this time last year, bringing additional capacity to the team. And I think we are now placed for our big year in 2022, when we expect to commit to in excess of 110,000 homes. When I'm done with this, there will be a spool, a drone shot of some of the developments so that you can see that. So this is the project in Delta. That's about 650 units. It's primarily completed now and being sold to people. This is Kano. In total, it's just over 700 units right at the heart of Kano, the Millennium Damanawa in Kano. This is in Ogun State, still under construction. Probably one of the more challenging ones that we have, will not be finished until about December. Is 1,020 units in the new Mako City. So this is the show home and the magical 2 million naira house. This is semi-detached. I think to the right there, the fourth yellow brick is the 1 bedroom, which we can sell or can be sold for 2 million. And to the other side is 2 bedroom units, which is slightly more expensive at about 3 to 3.5 million naira. So this is kind of our position as at the end of Q2. We are well ahead of the COP, significant increase in interest income, but also in terms of the retained earnings, profit before tax is almost 90% growth on last year's. Now, before people think that what we are in is just making money off poor people, no. If you look at the line, there is no dividend being paid to shareholders. All of this money is getting plowed back into creating more and more and more houses and absorbing the shocks that is coming up. But really the point that we are trying to prove is this, that it is possible to do social housing and still be financially sustainable. It is not a charity work, but at the same time, it's not something that you are doing the best to shaft people who are least able to provide it. And that basically is the message that we are trying to put and the foundation that we are trying to build for the organization. So, now, things don't always go well, and I think we want to be honest with that about what we are doing, what are the key issues that we are dealing with, why we are dealing with them in that way. So, first, we acknowledge that currently, as of today, about 63% of our portfolio is sitting in a particular geography of the country. We understand that. Second bullet point, I've already spoken about this, that we have a low risk appetite. And again, there is really no apologies for that. We want to have, for the time being, a very low risk appetite to ensure that we protect the balance sheet of the company, that allows us to access more capital before taking on board higher risk. And that is why we are prioritizing lending to private developers, but through state governments who are able to provide us with ISPOs or irrevocable standing payment orders. So that is, but as I said, eventually we'll move out of that, but that is an operationally wise thing to do in terms of where we are now. Thirdly, big focus on social housing. Some of our initial schemes were not quite where we expect them to be, but currently, on average, with the exception of Lagos, Kano, Abuja, and Port Harcourt, where we are taking where the situation demands some uplift, is to stick to between 2.5 and 5.5 million naira as the lower and upper end of the houses that the fund builds. Currently, we have 15 million naira portfolios, homes in our portfolio that we can't wait to get. Rid of them. As I said earlier, we have significant interest from the states. We have really enjoyed significant interest from them in supporting what we are doing. And they have been generous. States like Kano, where it said that there's no land, gave us in excess of 200 hectares, over 200 hectares of land for social housing development. As I also said earlier, we aim to complete our preparations on the student housing, rental housing, and incremental housing by December, with the initial commitments hopefully happening early 2022. We are becoming very financially robust and sustainable now, and I think that our internal capacity in terms of staffing is now at its peak, and we should, by December, I think we should be where we are in terms of having the capability to do what we need to do. As you see there, we have 6 product lines that we are working on. All of these sit within the channels. So the affordable housing for sale, which is in the affordable housing fund, we expect to do 10,000 homes this year, and I think we have a strong chance of hitting that, and slight growth next year and into the next year. I talked about rental housing as a major push for us. Between now and 2023, we expect to do about 50,000 units of rental housing. A lot of those will be through partnership with housing corporations, primarily, but also perhaps a number of cooperatives. We are fascinated about the idea of incremental housing, about people building their housing with micro loans, which is really the way that for many of us, our parents built their houses. This is a major initiative for us, and we hope that the first investments can be made in 2022 I already talked about student housing. We are committed this year to investing a significant amount of our capital in an initial four university sites, and hopefully on the back of that and lessons learned, we'll push forward. To other universities in subsequent years. Social housing, this essentially, as you can see, that is the rump of our operational projections. This year we're looking at 40,000 units, on the way to doing that, and then ramp up to a peak of 50,000 per annum over the next couple of years. Sites and services, in some places, particularly in the southeast, we're finding that this is an attractive product that enables people to access homes. And that is something that we have developed a product paper. We are working on it, and I hope that either later this year, Q4, or early next year, we should be able to make the first investment into a formal site and services. What you will see in the second to the last line is that from 2022, our borrowing goes up quite significantly, because we can't continue to rely. Our government has been extremely generous to us. We now need to begin to take on significant amount of debt, and that obviously has implications, but that is really the primary way in which you can build sustainability into the program that we want to deliver, and I think we are quite ready and prepared for that. So just before I finish, last slide. Right. So this. It's easy to present that everything is hunky-dory, because not everything that we face can be changed. We understand that the social housing space is a difficult one. It's a big learning curve, and we are learning as an organization. But as an organization, we are determined, and I think that some of the early results and the trust, not just from government, but some of the development finance institutions who are putting a huge amount of trust in the business, is evidence that even though we can't change things, but we can face them. And part of the key message for me today is looking to work with many of you in this room, both private sector developers, government agencies, mortgage banks, to see how we can work together to ensure that the first picture that I showed begins a disappearing aspect of our urban landscape. Thank you very much.
Keep a date with Housing Development Program every week on TVC. Housing Development is the first and pioneer housing program in Nigeria and by extension Africa. It remains the authentic voice of the Nigerian housing and construction industry. Housing Development is the only credible and specialized platform for seasoned professionals in the build industry, where quality and credible players in the real estate sector meet to interact, showcase, and analyze government policies. It is no doubt that hundreds of thousands of prospective Nigerians who desire to own their personal properties have done so through the assistance of Housing Development Program in the last 10 years. If you are a stakeholder in the build industry, here is where you must be. We are authentic, credible, and supported by all the leading professionals in the build industry. Housing Development on TVC.